colleague from Bayonne, Mayor Mark Smith, is here, and I thank him for crossing the river and coming over. Thank you very much, Mayor. And Assemblyman Jason O'Donnell from Bayonne, who's also a fire captain. Thank you, Assemblyman. And Assemblyman Joe Bryan and Assemblywoman Empiano, who represent the 20th District. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Annette. And Councilman Bollwage, Frank Cuesta, who I work with very closely in the city of Elizabeth. Monsignor O'Donnell and Director Vitullo, and to the family and friends who are here. I believe Tony Wieners is also here as the president of the state PBA. Thank you, Tony, for coming to City Hall in Elizabeth, and Bill Adam, who's also the state president of the FMBA. Pat Burns, the president of the local FMBA, and President Superior is here. Steve McConnell is here. Steve, I don't want to forget Steve, sorry. Thank you, Steve, for coming as well. To Monsignor O'Donnell, who comes out every year for prayers. We thank the Monsignor for his support. And to the directors of the city of Elizabeth, thank you for coming. To all the family who's here as well. It's good to see you, retired Chief Ed Sis. Thank you, Chief, for coming. I don't know if Chief Kelly is here. Is he here? Or any other retired? No. Chief Sis, thank you for coming as well. And the reason we're late is Deputy Chief retired Phil Morris. Did he make it in here yet? And I were dealing with a car accident in the parking garage. It started about 10 to 11 when a young woman pulled out and hit another car and had two little kids in the back seat. So Phil Morris and I were dealing with that. The kids are fine. The mother shook up a little bit, and the police are on the way. So we just stayed there with her until the police were on their way. So I apologize for the lateness. I know a lot of you may have a schedule and get to do other things. But today we promote Tommy McNamara to Chief of the department, someone who's been in the department for well over 30 years, has done almost every single job you can ask in the fire department. He has represented us as the acting chief over the last year since Chief Sisk retired. And he's been someone who not only has the ability to lead firemen, but also to make decisions and be someone who clearly this community can be proud to have as chief of the Elizabeth Fire Department. He's decisive. He's a listener. He's someone who takes into concern the people and the firemen's thoughts. How do we do things better? How can we do things in a way that saves the taxpayer money? And during this last hurricane, he was not only coordinating with Deputy Chief or Acting Chief Pat Shannon and the Police Department, our response, but updated me on a regular basis on how many basements were flooded, knocked on every single door of a resident who called and had a flooded basement and said, there will be members of the fire department here to pump out your basement. As of yesterday, I think we pumped out somewhere between 400 and 500 basements, and that water that was receded on its own, the folks also received a personal visit. That could not have been done without cooperation between the rank and file firemen, the chief, and the deputy chiefs, and all of the captains. I like this little guy. He's got applause lines already. That's pretty good. But that's the commitment that the fire department has here in the city of Elizabeth and the police department. And I'm thrilled that members of the General Assembly are here. And the members of the General Assembly that are here, Annette, Joe, and Jason, clearly understand the fights that mayors like Mark Smith and I have with the big guy that's running the show down in Trenton. Keep in mind the restrictions that he has put in place. When he brags about 200,000 jobs in government have been eliminated, they are your public safety workers. They are your teachers. They are the people who we rely on in cases of an emergency. And when the response becomes slower, it's because Trenton brags about a reduction in municipal employees. They brag about a 2% cap that clearly affects the ability of mayors to run their cities. What's going on in Trenton is an abomination of home rule and the ability for mayors to promote firemen, to negotiate with firemen, to negotiate with policemen, and to understand the needs of their community. on, as well as make promotions in the police department later on this year. But clearly we are going to do the same job we did 2, 3, 4 years ago with less people. Not because we want to do it with less people, because Governor Christie told us we have to do it with less people. But that means that people will wait for service, people will wait, and it also runs the risk of endangering the men and women of the Elizabeth Police and Fire Department because of policies from Trenton. As long as I'm the mayor, I will continue to speak out against what I consider Chris Christie hurting municipal, fire, police, and emergency medical services. I can also tell you as mayor, I've never been more proud of the emergency services than the last couple of days, over the last couple of hours. Whether we had a woman with chemotherapy who needed a generator, whether we had a person who needed medicine, we had somebody there to respond. I remember visiting the fire department on Sunday and the police department, as well as the emergency shelters on Sunday, and somebody was always out there working. Whether we asked the firemen to stay over to 12 o'clock in the afternoon or longer, they were able to stay there. The policemen as well. I know this is not a policeman celebration, but everybody coordinated their efforts here in the city of Elizabeth, whether they were a fireman or a captain or a battalion chief or a deputy chief, for the betterment of the citizens of our community. And as the mayor, you cannot be prouder of that work that happened. And I want to thank all that were involved in the first responding public service who know how to pick up the phone and say, hey, you'll have your power back on in a couple of days, instead of an automated response that says, you'll have it on by September 4th, and then hang up the phone on it. Maybe that's what Governor Christie should do, is she should yell at public service and say, hey, come up with a better response to people who don't have electricity, as opposed to the way you deal with the police and firemen. But I want to ask Senator Joe Bryan to speak on behalf of the elected officials that are here, because normally we don't have this great gathering of other elected officials. And he's the majority leader of the state assembly, and if he wouldn't mind, he's my assemblyman, it's saying a few words on behalf of Jason and Ed and Mayor Mark Smith. Assemblyman Joe Bryan.